I like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of the land on which I'm coming to you. The land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, it's upon their ancestral lands from which One Space Love streams to you. May we also pay respect to the knowledge embedded forever within the Aboriginal custodianship of country.
My space, your space. Your space, my space. Our space. One Space Love.
One Space Love show for the love of music, lifestyle and well-being while caring for our planet. On this show, I will be chatting with musicians, artists and creative minds that are living life on purpose while doing what they love for the love of it. I'm Steph Pappas and I'm your host and you're listening to One Space Love Show.
One Space Love. My space, your space. Your space, my space. Our space. One Space Love. One Space Love. One Space Love.
Welcome Dave Stringer and Sheila Nicholls to the One Space Love Show. So good to see you both again.
It's great to be
Good
here.
to see you too.
I think the last time we saw each other was 7 years ago or something like that in Bondi.
At the One Space HQ, and we did the Satellites Guide tour, and Sheila came over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And you took the picture that turned out to be the back cover of our new album, Thrum.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned that. I'm really looking forward to see that. Was that outside the venue, outside the love sign?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a beautiful, happy moment.
Yeah.
Thanks
we
for capturing
both
it.
so happy and like big smiles. So that was the right pick.
Oh, I look forward to seeing that. And we're chatting today because you've got finally all this music that I've been longing to hear shared, with many, many people all around the world. Thrum, and we're talking about this, and this is a new release that's coming out with this music. And Sheila, you've been working on that with Dave. But before we go into that, I just like to always start off to just warm us up and introduce us to the listeners by just answering the statement, I am.
All right. I am a kernel of the oneness, navigating myself through and through the oneness, which is so apropos. And just choosing the joy, choosing the spaces between the spaces to allow the esoteric to be real in my life, to allow the melodies that have not been written yet to come through, or, hopefully be blessed by their visitation. Those are the most beautiful moments. Dave, go on.
I am a series of questions and mistakes, and both of which drive me forward in surprising ways. The questions never end and never actually lead to answers, but they do lead to other questions. The mistakes sometimes in retrospect turn out to not have been mistakes at all. Somehow you end up playing with whatever hand you're dealt and you make art out of what happens. Sometimes, at least in jazz, they say if you make a mistake, do it again. And now it becomes a thing. So the funny thing is that art exists a little bit outside of life in the sense that we're able to perfect things. Like the words actually come out right because you have the time to do that. You hit that note, even if you sang it 20 times in the studio, at least you got it right this time. And so it represents a kind of like a perfection of life in a certain way. And yet it's the very mistakes that we make that lead to the perfection of that art. And I'm constantly humbled by that process. And that brings me back around to a feeling of wonder, which is where it all begins. So.
I asked that question for years now to so many guests, and truly both of your answers are so beautiful. Thank you so much. And talking about where your wonder began, Dave, I want to just direct it to you because having known you and worked with you for so long, having this opportunity to chat with you, I actually found out some things that myself I didn't know. As a young boy, music has always been a part, and I feel like wonder is you've always been someone that's, curious and looking for different avenues to find that connection to the divine. But you were taken over to an ashram because of your video production through a woman that had you came to her in her dream. Can you take us back to that, where you were introduced to Bhakti?
Okay. It's funny. I actually probably met Sheila not too long after this, although our relationship kind of quickened after I came back from India. But in short, I had one of the worst video editing jobs of my life. I was working for this motorcycle magazine, and it was really kind of like, I would call it biker porn in a way, like chicks and bikes. Okay. And
that was your worst job, Dave.
It was terrible. Actually, well, yeah. I mean, in the sense that the way the job ended is that the owner's son came in.
No.
What, you don't want to hear that? It's dark.
It's dark. Story. God,
how do you get there? All right. I'll spare you the bloody.
Oh, no, we can't do
the bloody ending of it.
No, it's just, okay.
Anyway, it all ended badly. But in the midst of it, a friend of mine had been working in an ashram in India and had been working as their video editor. And as these happens, sometimes people can be there for a decade, and all of a sudden you go up to speak to the spiritual teacher and they say, okay, it's time for you to go. And so this friend of a friend was basically kicked out of the ashram for after 10 years of being in there. And she had skills as a video editor. She finds herself in LA looking for a job. She gets my name, and I actually had a job that I knew of and referred her to it. And so she got this job. 3 months later, I get a call from her, and she's like, I have a job for you.
Wow.
And she mentioned this ashram, which I was not interested in at all. And she said, but there's a job, and it's for going to India. And I said, why do you think I'm the person who's supposed to go? And she said, because I sat down and in my meditation, you appeared as the person who was meant to go. So pretty strange way to get a job. And I talked to them, and the money wasn't that great. So I turned it down. And then everything that I was up for fell apart, and then I was broke. So then I called them back and said, hey, is that job still open? And they said, yes. Can you leave in a week? And so they did what they had to do with the visa. The next thing I know, I was in India, totally unprepared for the experience, utterly unknowledgeable about what I was getting into. But my exact job was to work on videos about Eastern philosophy for beginners. They hired me as a beginner so that I would essentially make videos from the perspective of somebody who was seeing this for the first time. So things happened that triggered my wonder button, that kind of put aside many of my doubts and misgivings. And I had an extraordinary experience, which gave me a kind of meta language to look at my life after that. And that's how I encountered all this chanting of mantras. I'd been a musician before I went to India, and this all started to make sense in certain ways through that lens.
And with that experience, take me to then how did you get back to LA, and where did you meet Sheila then? Where did your paths cross?
This leads
Once upon a time.
Once upon a time, yeah.
There was a mutual friend.
Yeah.
That should I tell us? Should go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go
ahead.
We had this. So I arrived in LA, like washed up on the shores when I was 19, not really knowing what the hell I was doing there, but I was really just running away from my family. But I've met this really pivotal person, this guy Paul Gordon. He'd had a couple of number ones. He wrote some D.L. Moore stuff, and he had a Peter Cetera, Amy Grant record, I think, and he built the studio in his house in Laurel Canyon, and it was really still had the flavor of kind of the Doors, Joni Mitchell, and Mamas and Papas back in the early 90s, I feel like. And he would hold these parties, and he would invite this incredible, just strange smorgasbord of people, but very music-y people. So I remember sort of hanging out with like Alanis Morissette and Melissa. I mean, there was a bunch of LA singer-songwriter, people-y, businessy, anyway, he would have these parties on a regular, and somehow I think we bumped into each other there early 90s, I think, right?
Yeah,
You can fill it-
early
you can
to
fill
mid
that in.
90s.
Go
But
ahead.
here's the critical thing
Come
is
on.
that Paul Gordon is a great collector of people.
Yeah.
And what this has to do with the modern kirtan movement is that at the point that I started making kirtan records, or the first one, I had been asked after I came back from India to lead some kirtans at yoga studios in LA, where this whole scene was starting to burgeon in the late 1990s. And people asked me to make a kirtan record, and my friends were largely people that I knew, musicians from this Laurel Canyon scene. And because the ashram musicians that I knew had a lot of love in their heart, but not necessarily a lot of skill in their voices or their fingers, I invited professional musicians to start playing with me and record with me. And so those first records that we made, Japa and Mala, I invited Sheila, who sings famously Govinda Jaya Jaya on Mala, to sing with me, but also Donna Delory and Cece White and Girish, and a whole cast of characters who discovered mantra really through those experiences. I used to have parties at my house that were chant parties, and I got all these people on record because they were excellent musicians and really, really good songwriters. And I was a little embarrassed. I was like, I had never made a record really. And I was like, could you come sing Sanskrit mantras? And there was a great vibe. And subsequently, Donna and Cece have made records on their own and have become well known as mantra singers themselves. Sheila has made a number of really, really beautiful, spiritually inquisitive records. And that's one thing that kind of brings us back together. Because she's always been an advocate. She's like, Dave, you have to make a record in English. So
was I.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I was a pop singer. I had I wrote songs, but they were, very self-reflective. But I think that we came back around when if you live your life without, I'm going to use the G word, but if you live your life, because England, everybody's
Please
pretty
use
much
the G
atheist
word
at this point.
Yeah.
It's okay, great. So in England, everyone, or a lot of people, I'm just making generalizations, but I grew up atheist, and everybody is, so, evolution or bust. And, there's all these churches empty, and for me, I grew up thinking it was just sort of just old people and stupid people went to church. But when I got to America and I realized everybody still went to church, I was completely gobsmacked. And was very angry at the way Christianity played out in politics over here. But then, of course, if you're living life as an island, you will crash and burn because the esoteric is real. And as a songwriter, I kind of knew that, but I had no vocabulary around it. So I'd been burning through myself. And it wasn't until sort of 10, maybe 15 years after the Laurel Canyon thing, something like that, that I started really writing songs. I didn't want to write ooh baby baby songs anymore, and I had done a lot of Vipassana meditation, and I had a new vocabulary that I was trying to bring into my writing. And I think we met at Bhakti Fest and we listened, and we realized that we had a lot more in common than we had maybe when we were younger, So
yeah, we kind of lost track of each other for a number of years after, the Japa
really
and Mala period.
Go away.
And Sheila had a huge record deal with Hollywood Records and went off to, appear in all these TV shows. And I kind of actually felt I wasn't worthy. And but there I was on stage at Bhakti Fest, and I get this text, oh, your phone number is still the same.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm out in the audience. So we reconnected in that space and started singing together.
What year was that, guys? What year was that?
My daughter was like
probably 2000.
Percy was like 4, so it's really like
2011.
Yeah,
2011. Yeah. So it took us a while to actually make a record together again, or for the first time. But Sheila and I have a particular vocal chemistry that is kind of swirly. Like it's not predictable what kind of harmonies we're going to sing on top of one another. It's entirely intuitive, and there's just something magical about how we approach melody. Like we're singing harmonies, but actually, I don't know, we're really singing different melodies around each other. I think
and it's
that's
very
the thing.
intuitive. It's really in the moment when we're playing around and creating something new. It's not a thought through thing. And that to me is always just a sign of like, yeah, keep going, when it's not a linear process, right?
The first thing that happened, though, is that before we made Thrum, Sheila made a record called All of Nature, which I have a credit on as co-producer, which meant to held the space in a lot of different ways. And I don't sing much on it, but it was made here in my studio and with a great deal of advocacy on my part. And one of the things that she wrote that really stopped me in my tracks is this song called God, a commentary. It had a different, little longer title at the time. Bill Maher, Don't Throw the Baby Out with the Bathwater, or something like this. Anyway, but she starts out asking this question. She says, God, so much baggage on that word. Yeah, it means so many different things to so many people. Yeah, what is God?
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes on to pose a few possibilities.
Well, yeah, it was
maybe something infinite in all directions.
But I didn't want it to be dogmatic because as soon as you start using the word Lord, you've lost the Jews, right? Or it just needed to be like, if we're talking about an infinite universe and we're then God is undefinable by definition. So it was also just me coming back from atheism and having really struggling with that word and all of the just the layers and the baggage and trying to feel comfortable with that word and try to, maybe it's audacity, I don't know. But for me, it was very important to redefine for myself, after choosing to consciously not use that word for a decade, to come back and figure out what it really meant to me in order to be able to move forward with my own trip here,
Yeah. And weird for me because, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Sheila, where do you... because I read you've been connected with the Agape, with Michael Beckwith. Where did this, awareness cross your path? Because it's quite a big jump to go from atheist to
it's a really big jump.
Yeah, so
it's a big jump.
Is there a point where, I often find when I'm chatting with my guests that there's a moment, there's a few doorways, but there's these key people along the way. Can you?
Yeah.
Well,
let's see. I think, I'll just be straight up. I think that there was a point where there was a breakdown for me where it was not functioning. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I think at that point, in order to be able to sort your fractioned mind out, you have to essentially just submit to meditation, where you then experience the eye behind the eye. You start to objectify your subjective. You start to see your thoughts and you start to go, oh yeah, I don't need to react to that one. I can just let it go and let it just dissipate into the nothingness from whence it came. And I am not my thoughts. And these sort of things started to become really apparent. And I think, I was going through divorce and I had a young child and I was a single mother. And I had a friend who basically said to me, you got to go to Agape. That's where the work's being done. And I was like, screw church. I don't do church. And she was like, well, I don't want to be a friend then if you don't you could go figure yourself out. And she meant so much to me that I went and I sat in the back of this, Agape is this kind of amazing, multicultural, everybody's welcome, everybody's there. It definitely comes out of Christian Science, but it's a place where there's no original sin and there's no Messiah. It's just take responsibility for your vessel and do the work, and so that we can collectively do the work. If each individual does the work, then, and this was brand new information, and I had never been, but I pretty much sat in the back and judged everybody for about 2 years. Like, oh, these like West Side hippies, blah, blah. And but there was, I would come out feeling better. And my brothers would make fun of me and, think you're special and like this is, and try to argue their way. And I just found myself that there was no denying the fact that there were these lessons there that I hadn't been close to my whole life.
To throw your own words back at you, you were judging everyone's delusions and not seeing your own.
That's right. Thanks for that.
I love that.
Well, it's just being totally truthful.
Those are some of the first words to her song, Infinite Mind.
It's true.
Okay. Beautiful. And so the journey went on through that. So that was a big part of it.
A huge deal, yeah, because I had this record deal with Disney and you are the product, and you so I had been sort of detached from this kind of very pure thing where I'd just written songs to try to take myself, be my own shrink. And I would like write a song, play it 100 times and then forget about it because that would be done processing. Whereas when you have a record deal like that, you've got your 13 A&R guys standing around and putting their fingers in the pie and wanting to, and trying to, and it just can get really confusing. And it took me a good 3 years to write a song that I actually liked when I got out of there.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a sort of a recovery to find what is pure and clean. Because I was never after the material. For me, I'm so grateful to be able to feel, it makes me feel so good when I write a song and I love it. And that becomes a self-perpetuating thing. And whether other people like it for me is almost secondary, because I know that if I've reached myself, I may reach somebody else, and that's cool, but that's not my beacon. I don't go, oh, I want to write a commercial song here, or I want to write a song to these people.
I think that's a place we meet, because I'm not motivated by that at all either. I'm just trying to get to the guts of what I'm trying to say, and even just trying to figure out what I'm trying to say. Like all the songs that I wrote on Thrum start with a kind of wordless nonsense. And so it comes out as this kind of like baby talk babble or whatever, but I feel like the sounds go in certain places. Like it definitely goes ooh here, it goes here. Eventually words start to come in and I'm like, yeah, that word feels right here. And then there's a mess of words that I don't see what they have to do with one another. And then there's a moment where it connects. And all of a sudden I suddenly realize what the song is about. Like the aboutness just came out of my unconscious or subconscious mind. And then the work happens to like try and fill in the blanks and, get to a deeper place about like, well, what are you really asking here? Or what is this, what does this really mean? I know Sheila's process is a little different. She writes, I think, faster than I do.
No.
Maybe.
I think that I'm not attached to whether I write a song, if I don't care if I write a song a year or a song, every month or whatever. But when it comes though. Like when you feel that inspiration or whatever that is, that thing, sometimes it can just, but Tari must said that. She said sometimes they come in 4 minutes and sometimes they come over a long period of time. And sometimes you don't know what that song means until 6 years after you've written it.
And I think,
a melody to me comes in seconds.
Wow.
No, but sometimes you don't know what to do with it, but it's there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that comes back to when you are an open vessel and when you are able to tap into that connection and be open, then it can come through you, and that sounds like what you sort of met, you went on your separate paths and you've reunited with this awareness throughout your own journeys. Like it seems like you sort of both went on similar paths and met back up in the middle, and then you're able to share this music,
Yeah, we're meeting in a place of the subconscious too. I think we're coming from the same playbook there.
Also, I'm sorry, but actually, I really like that my age, because there's wisdom, right? We live in LA where everybody's just giving their 16-year-olds nose jobs for graduation, and you have to really, after living here for so long, you sort of have to figure out how you're going to grow gracefully. Not that I'm old, but I'm like, as a person that is not the ingenue any longer, there's a wisdom that goes with that, which I think that is what really reconnected us. We were slightly more mature, and had reached conclusions that more
and
mature.
Are asking questions we might not have asked.
Yeah,
at an
that's what I'm
earlier
trying to
age,
get at.
Or drawing conclusions.
Yeah, beautifully
in some ways.
said. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a funny thing too. On one hand, there's different kinds of knowledge here. There's acquired knowledge, and then there's like, I suppose, intuitive knowledge, which I used to discount. But I find that sometimes in the process of writing a song, you hit on something that you didn't know that you knew. And suddenly it becomes clear. Like say some of the songs on Thrum have pretty deep philosophical roots in them. And my wife Dervla is a PhD candidate in philosophy, and she would be going through some of the lyrics and she goes, well, that's very, Wittgensteinian, Wittgensteinian of you, and I realized that in some ways I was stumbling onto some places in philosophy that I hadn't necessarily studied, but was finding. And I know I see some of that in Sheila's songs too. Even in terms of melodies, I've studied raga a little bit, and played things, chants particularly for Indian classical musicians. They were like, oh, that's Raga Yaman. And
Yeah.
I didn't know what Raga Yaman was, but I did know that that sequence of notes felt perfect like that, as if like I'd stumbled onto some underlying structure or knowledge in the universe. And I can't speak for Sheila, but I feel like when a song is complete, you feel like you ran into something that already existed.
That's what I live for,
Yeah.
is when I feel like something just has arrived that was always there in the invisible, but suddenly it's crystallized, and it crystallized with me. And that's what I live for. It's the most exciting thing.
Take us now to the album. Some of these songs were already there. Like how did you bring it all together with all, your different backgrounds in music and instruments and vocals and
Well, I have to give a little credit where credit is due. I hadn't used keyboard very much in my recordings. A lot of these things are written in like open tunings on guitar. Like I deliberately get myself lost so that I'm not doing something formulaic. But a friend of Sheila's, Mitchell Foreman, is a foremost jazz pianist, and I met him in the process of working on All of Nature, Sheila's record, and he brought a new set of colors to the paint box and allowed me to step back in certain ways and work with a different level of musicianship, to paint in a different way, in some ways to even look at, he arranged the strings on the record. And for example, the song Thrum has a lot of sounds in it that are sounds. And there were some definite pictures. I'm trying to grab my own words here. And we found that writing the strings, he was able to like grab the words and paint with them, like, like there's this part, the murmuring strum of the wind in the trees, the chimes that mark the days, the throb and thrum and cacophony as every atom plays. And he's able to like take the string section and vividly illustrate those sounds, and so partly the record came out of some sketches, of sitting with piano and saying, how would this work with a string quartet? That was kind of a new experience, because there are 4 songs on the record that are definitely marked by string quartet: River, Thrum, God, and Weightless. So that was an entirely new set of pictures to paint with, I guess.
Chocolates in the box.
Yeah. But the other thing is that, some of the, just speaking for some of the songs that I wrote on the record, I suppose my own criticism is that there's a point where I was just staring into myself a little too much. I mean, it's a very solitary process. And I felt like the words were better spoken in the form of a conversation. So I kind of approached Sheila and said, hey, could we have a dialogue about this? And it was the same thing with her song with God, because it was I have my own version on my record, and it's really just a single person, which is where it originated from, of going, I will deconstruct and reconstruct this concept in 3.5 minutes, right? And then when Dave and I sing it, the context changes completely. It's a lot more, it's almost softer because we're sort of discussing it together. What could it be, or how could this? It's slightly less declarative, and I think both versions have their own. Right. But there's a different space. There's a conversation. It's the same thing with the song The Satellite Sky. It was kind of like a lonely cry, but then when another person is singing it too, you start to get a different level of depth and resonance, of dimensionality to the words, because it puts it more in the perspective of, it's like everyone's having this experience.
Makes it more personable because it's
right. Because even the thing to say, like the line that we're satellites, you and I, echoes apart, like we're the same, but somehow
Never quite touching.
Yeah, never getting close enough to quiet my heart.
Which is the experience that we all have as humans. We have this perception that we're separate and individual beings, which of course we are, but at the same time, on an atomic level, there's only oneness happening. So it feels, that this existential loneliness that we have is ultimately, it's very real, but it's absolutely not at all,
Right.
Absolutely. When we have that realization that we are all connected and in that oneness, then the aloneness.
Yeah. And I don't think that's a cliche at all. I think it's something that I think eventually science may get to. I mean, I'm posturing somewhat, but I think that something I feel like is entirely possible is that consciousness is primary before matter is consciousness.
I agree with you. I would say there's a raging debate about this.
Yeah, there is a raging debate, and I think it makes people feel really uncomfortable.
I know, but I think it's
personally
so
feel like
important.
I think it's great. Let's go there.
No, there's an Australian philosopher, David Chalmers, who says that if you can't reduce something to constituent parts, it must be fundamental. Okay, so electromagnetism, for example, and gravity can't be reduced down to something that makes them up. So they are fundamental forces of the universe. Chalmers says that we have tried to find an electrochemical or molecular source of consciousness, and we have not. Mm-hmm. He says, therefore, it's very likely that consciousness itself is a fundamental force. And it's not that the world makes up consciousness, it's that consciousness makes up the world.
Makes up the world.
And that's something that has deep, deep roots in Eastern philosophy, for sure. And it also, in some ways, to circle back to maybe some of the agape stuff, this idea that, from there, they've looked at it, they're looking through a kind of a Christian lens, but in one that says, we start with, like, we're connected to source. Like, there's nothing wrong with us.
Yeah.
The
removal of the guilt of the dogma is so, it's so important. Like,
what goes wrong later, but we're not born with that, whereas, and that's goes right against the dogma of original sin, but if all is consciousness and all is from source, then okay, let's get back to that, and let's try and remove the impediments in our eyes and our experience to experiencing that.
And ultimately, that's the journey that we're all taking. And one of the ways to do that is through music, which is, what you just said, Dave.
Yeah.
It's an avenue to bring us back home. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And music gives us both a way of asking these questions and even discussing our difference and distance, but in a way that creates resonance between us. So the music itself kind of resolves the conflict in its way.
And did you both get to sing at Agape together?
We have done, yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's a couple of videos up on YouTube.
I have to share that.
Bring people's attention to. River and God, a commentary, we recorded at Agape.
Oh, you did?
With a string quartet.
Yeah.
And Mitchell Foreman playing piano and full band
good,
on a big stage with like 1,000 people in the audience.
It's lovely.
And it happened actually just before the pandemic.
Yeah,
I mean, like days before they closed everything down. And it's, they're really good songs. And I look forward to next year, once the record's out, touring with a string quartet and playing some of those songs.
Well, that takes me there. So in that moment when you had that experience and then everything got shut down, how did you then, it takes a lot to then go, I'm going to continue with this vision. I'm going to continue bringing this out with everything that was going on. And you had a few projects going that we'll get to later, Dave. But, how did you make that work? Were you in separate places? How did you get it all out ready to finish?
I think there's no chance you can't stop being a musician even if there's a pandemic.
Yeah.
You sort of just go, well, and part of being a musician is that you constantly, move. Things are always shifting and changing. You just get used to it. So I think I did a lot of teaching, and you just kept producing stuff.
I mean, I went from being a touring animal to being basically a studio cat.
Yeah,
and
I like
producing. Yeah, producing stuff for other people, and trying to figure out how to do sessions remotely, writing remotely. I mean, Sheila and I have a deep and abiding friendship, and so there was a little bit of a pod going on here.
Mm-hmm.
So on that level, there were a few people that we were. I think everybody had this. There were a few people that you saw because without social interaction, something in us dies.
Most people didn't. My mother, some people lived so by the rules. We were very lucky, I think, in Southern California because it's California and people are always like, yeah, man, and there's a vibe like that constantly. And it's, I think that for an urban area as well, if you're in New York, you're like super chocker on top of each other. I think also in the older cities, it's that, but there's so much space here between us as well. So,
well, climate wise, we could, hang out and meet in the backyard. I mean, the climate in Sydney and Los Angeles are very similar. So I think, you would understand it's the same. It's just the opposite. You've got jacaranda trees. We have them, it's like it's the same vegetation.
Yeah, there's a lot of outside spaces for us.
And so during the pandemic, at least we could meet outside, but with very strict rules.
Yeah, would you say that the slowing down of everything, especially with you, Dave, and the constant being on the road, enabled you to really get this album, to a place where you could share it?
If I'd been touring all the time, we wouldn't have got it done. So in a way, that pause, that enforced pause, turned out to be very creative. I mean, at first, I'll confess that I had some dark months there where I was like, I don't know who I am or what this means or whether I can continue or, because without, I suppose that, when you write something, it's your own private little world, but our art has meaning when we connect to an audience in some way. And without an audience that could respond to it, I'm sorry, Zoom's just not a really good way of doing it because you don't get that feeling back. I mean, like in chant music, the audience is actually singing, but even as a songwriter, if you're playing for somebody, you're feeling their response to it and it changes your delivery.
It's an energy exchange.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that was kind of a dark time. Sheila and I did some, through the agape scene, we did a few highly, carefully sanitized.
Because they were broadcasting the whole way through.
Yeah.
So
they were.
Yeah.
So we would show up in a studio and we did some things together and, that felt great, even though on one level you felt like you were pushing against the boundaries of what was permitted. But art felt so essential just to kind of stay alive. So, we kept our interchange up during the pandemic.
But I do think that without the pandemic, we probably would not have been able. I think that's the really important. Like when I think about it, the pandemic was actually you were not touring, and there was time in the studio, and I think that we really did undertake the situation during that time.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work.
Yeah, and it gave us more time to reflect, and to try and, I suppose, take another approach and look deeper into how it should be. So I suppose the record might have come out faster if the pandemic hadn't happened, but anyway, those circumstances made it what it will be
what it is. And so when is the release of Thrum?
We expect it to be, right now we're starting to set it up and the record's done, but held it back because in another project, Mantra Americana, that I produced, and I'll talk about it in a different podcast. We made that during the pandemic as well. That was another thing that I was working on, and we got nominated for a Grammy in this past cycle. And although I was set to release Thrum this year, the second half of Mantra Americana just came out, and politics being what they are, sometimes if you are nominated for something and you don't win the first time, second round or third time's a charm. And so on advice of publicists, etc., I was told, hey, you've got a ticket to the Grammys, so take it. And I'm known mostly for singing in Sanskrit, so releasing an album in English is, seems like a radical move. It seems so strange. It's like everything's completely so flipped, but
I'm excited.
The idea, the idea is that it honestly, I don't know what the Grammys exactly mean, except for they do convey credibility. And I mean, the Grammys do, the Recording Academy does a lot of great work on behalf of musicians in terms of trying to secure rights and things like this. But it, as an artist, a lot of the time you just feel like you might have made a huge mistake with your life, and
really?
That, and then there might have been a more secure path that you could have chosen.
I can so understand. Get a real job, Stephanie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And even it just silenced a lot of things. Even my father, who always kind of was like, "Really, you're gonna pursue this as a musician?" And like once I was nominated for Grammy, like he was like, congratulations, like it just quiets that, and it internally for myself, it does help validate.
I mean, that's a massive, what you've just said. I think, getting that acknowledgement is, it sort of validates all that you're doing and enables you to step into that, isn't it? To have that validation. It's ironic, really.
It is ironic
that we're looking for our external,
Right, I know. And it's not supposed to be about validation, but yet it's somehow incredibly important.
Yeah.
But that also gives me the confidence at this point that now I can take this very beautiful, unusual chemistry and combination that Sheila and I have to take it to bigger audiences. And so I suppose I feel a little bit more legit, but I always feel like I'm working with people who are better than me.
We all have imposter syndrome. Everybody.
Yes, we all have it. Yeah. I'm just like, thank God I'm working with people who are really, really good.
See, I see you as Dave. I see you as really, really good. I see you as a master.
He's all right.
Thank you. But you have to understand, even this whole, to loop back to this whole Laurel Canyon thing that this came from. I mean, I was making a living as a video editor. I was not making records, and I was hanging out with these amazing musicians.
Like James Harris and Nikki Harris and Donna all sang back up for Madonna. They were all people that were earning thousands a week during the 80s. Just, really top notch, super professional. I mean, you have to be really incredible to be able to make six figures a year in the 90s in LA as a musician. You got to be like, because the competition is crazy here. And
So why do you think the two of you were invited to those parties? Like, to be able to be invited, what an honor.
Well, it was one of those, we were friends with Paulie. It was a very genuine space. It wasn't a really Hollywoody space. That was cool.
No, it was kind of like a Tuesday. It was a sort of regular Tuesday night potluck in Paul Gordon's backyard.
Yeah.
And you knew you'd made it if like your photo ended up on his refrigerator.
Right? Did your photo end up on his refrigerator?
Just like everybody's pictures stuck.
But I think he also is a person that grew up here, so he naturally had just grown up and knowing, Ray Don Chong, and like people were just sort of in this diaspora. For me, I mean, I came from, my family lives 60 miles north of London, and I remember opening for Katie Lang and taking my parents going, "Can I get validated?" And they're like, well, I mean, I suppose you write some songs, but but really, you're not going to do this. I mean, seriously, I don't know. That I jumped from there to there. But
Really?
it was,
No,
it
I'm
was
just
a thing.
really, you were opening for Katie Lang.
Yeah, no, my parents, like,
still
my
didn't
dad
see
sells
you.
beer and my mum runs a pub, and they're just like, well, come on, dear, can you just be a teacher or a nurse or something?
Interesting.
Which are all fine things to be, but the thing is, what you are is an amazing singer and
No,
songwriter.
no disrespect for teachers and nurses. I mean, actually, teaching is a wonderful thing. I love teaching. Actually, makes you feel like you're actually doing some good in the world if you actually connect with children, even if it's one or two. It's it's really fulfilling.
And Dave has been a teacher too. We'll go back there later on the next chat. But you were a teacher in the ashram, and you got introduced to your first harmonium.
Right.
Yeah, or in the schools, but during that path. And so, do you? My
that's
question,
another story.
Yeah. So my question is, do you both consider yourselves like, I am a musician, I am a producer, I am an artist? Are you really stepping into that now?
Yeah.
Yeah. At this point, I mean, don't think, but you always question yourself, and that's what keeps you on your toes. As soon as you become that kind of, without the humility thing, that's when you become ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
But I think at this point, absolutely. I mean, Dave is, let me just talk about Dave for a second. This guy wears every hat. He's one of the only people I know who can wear every single hat. He can write, perform, engineer, produce, book tours, be a publicist, edit, do social media, everything. And that's where it's come to at this point. Because back in the day, you could just be a musician and write songs.
Right. I will
but
just
now
say,
you can just,
Dave, you could talk about Sheila as well.
No. I mean, you have to do it all, which actually turns out to be exhausting. That's the downside.
You can do it all. That's amazing.
Well, it's helpful to have this knowledge. Yes. Whereas Sheila is singularly focused on the art of it.
Kind of.
No, but there's something really magical about that. And there's a lot of sort of administration and like business aspects of, being a musician. I rely on Sheila to keep coming back to source and drinking some pure inspirational water, maybe mushroom tea. But no more than anything, I think as time has got on, I'm starting to really appreciate the value of collaboration more than ever. Part of the subject of what we're talking about here has to do with a bigger kind of consciousness that we all participate in.
Yeah.
And so when you collaborate with someone, and music always involves, unless you're just sitting in your room with, a microphone and a guitar and you record everything yourself, and that's valid. But generally, it involves the input of a lot of different people. And as Sheila mentioned, if there's too many A&R executives involved, it can distort and dilute things. But when you surround yourself with people that you think are very, very talented, it can also contribute mightily to the process. Because when you feel like you've connected to source into a bigger sense of consciousness, in a way, you're off the hook. Okay. It's like when you don't feel like it's your job, you can ride with this thing and observe it forming itself. And which is, sure, there's parts of the vocals that we work out and we'll be like, okay, you sing this and I'll sing that. But mostly it's not like that.
Which is what makes it special.
That's
really.
Yeah.
Because that's not, I don't have that with anyone else. So. Not really.
Yeah. That's so beautiful.
Are you able to give us a little improv singing a part of one of the songs together? Have I put you on the spot? Just to show that harmonies of, to show the magic of your harmonies.
Sing God. Oh, hi.
Sure.
All right. God, so much baggage on that word. Means so many different things to so many people. What is God?
God, maybe something infinite in all directions.
Those perceived and unperceived alike.
Those perceived and unperceived alike. Infinite directions.
Infinite directions.
Dissolving into
Love without resistance. Love without a cure. Love everlasting. Love forevermore. We're just going to take a quick pause. That was God, a commentary off the new album Thrum, which comes out in 2024, I believe around March. I'm chatting today with Dave Stringer and Sheila Nicholls. You can actually head over to Dave Stringer Bandcamp and listen now and purchase the album Thrum. It is available on Bandcamp. And you can head over to Dave Stringer's YouTube to hear some of the live performances that we've talked about in today's show. And be sure to head over to davestringer.com and SheilaNichols.com to learn more about what they've got coming up in ways of live events and new releases. And Dave Stringer will be coming up on another podcast. We will be chatting about Mantra Americana. Dave Stringer is a Grammy-nominated artist, and we've got lots more to chat about. But both these artists I'm talking to today, I'm very excited that you go and learn more about them both, because they're both incredible artists, and it's been such a delight catching up with both of them. But you're listening to One Space Love Sessions. Now we're going to go back to my chat with Dave Stringer and Sheila Nicholls. Sometimes we do sort of just while we're hanging out, sometimes we just sort of like play some chords and sing and see where the harmonies go. That's always just like a fun sort of little exercise, you know. It's very playful, right? Because play is creativity, right? Never take yourself seriously at the very beginning of creation of something, and just allow it. That's where the flow comes. And I think we have
one thing that we've done, so we have a friend, Lauren Roche, who translated the Vijnana Bhairava, which is a serious text of Kashmir Shaivism, and it sounds very lofty and rarefied, but what he translated into like this really impactful English, and those some of those lyrics have been fodder for some great improvisations, and that's a different thing, because what Sheila and I would often do at retreats at places like Esalen, is we would start a riff with certain words, and the little tune would arise on the spot in front of an audience, or somebody would get up and start speaking some of this poetry, and we would start a groove underneath it and then start to loop little things.
Letting the melodies drop in until they become solid melodies, and then that becomes a group experience. But letting the participants like be moved by these just beautiful. I mean, he took 27 years, isn't that right? It's just beautiful.
I mean, Lauren is amazing. He's a sort of, I think, 70-year-old surfer dude who's like an expert in Sanskrit and spent like 27 or 30 years translating. Or I should say interpreting, because if you read other translations of this text, it's really super dense. And yet he came up with a really lively text.
Do you remember one of them off by heart? Because I remember we did this at one stage.
There's one song on Thrum, Reveal, and that we kind of got into, and he says at the beginning, he's like, the universe is here to reveal unlimited splendor, the infinite diversity of expression. No one can withstand her allure.
Let's see. And then we keep repeating. We took the word reveal out and just kept repeating it because the words came back. That's what the words were constantly reminding of what was going on as the constant unfolding of what's coming through and what's manifesting. Adore the colors and the shapes. Reveal her enchantment. Reveal the one who permeates us all.
The one great lover.
The one great lover.
Yeah. No one can withstand her allure.
Which is the chorus. One great lover.
And so to riff on these kind of words, I suppose is another piece of the record, because
because it takes you there.
Yeah.
We are thinking about these things: above and below, reveal, mortal and immortal, reveal, transient and eternal. When you're singing these things, it's taking you into that space. And I think that when you record, when you can capture that on a recording of the essence of the words. If you can get that, it's like butter.
Yeah, and it's part of the fabric of the record too. Like, what's the old adage about, like, when you get married, it's something borrowed,
something
new.
blue. Yep.
Yeah, something borrowed, something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. Okay, so if you look at the record, okay, this is the something borrowed part of it, but it's like sort of DNA coming from outside into the thing, and something new are, songs that were new, that, something that were written new, something old. There's repurposing some songs that we had previously recorded, but finding duets in them to bring new dimensionality to the song. And something blue. For example, all of these songs touch in some ways like the agony of being alive, and how that's right next to the wonder of it.
And the joy.
Ouch. And wow.
Wow.
Can you describe this record in 2 words? Yeah, ouch and wow.
Well, I can't wait to share all this music with the listeners. I listened to all the tracks, and I got to hear you play live as I was sharing in my lounge room, River, and I've heard Weightless, Satellite Sky. But to hear, and I've seen you, Sheila, play What Is God. I think I've seen you play that down in Melbourne and Sydney. But to hear it, in this new form, as we're saying, I was moved to tears. I'm not just saying that. I was absolutely moved to tears listening to it on my speakers here in the studio yesterday. And, I was really, really, it moved me. So I can, definitely the wow and the agony of I feel like we're all feeling so much at the moment. Like I've never felt so much heightened emotions, I'm a creative. But
sorry, I was just saying, you got me excited for a second, in that there is this new narrative. There's so many people writing songs now, I think, that where we need that new narrative. There's a new story emerging, right? An old one is passing, and we are looking constantly for that soundtrack. And I think that's what brings our fraternity. And I think that all started at Polly's house as well. Like a lot of these people that were there were just beautiful souls. And I think there's a sort of almost like a history now. I mean, I'm a British citizen, but I have a lot of history here now, and it's very specifically around this kind of West Coast searching. Because I can't have these conversations where I'm from. They're very difficult. The vocabulary, the British English the vocabulary is different. There's no claiming of the inner journey.
Yeah, you know what I want to say? Yeah, because at the moment I've watching Ted Lasso, and do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, and that's it, just on the lines of it's showing very much that upbringing that you would be talking about, and how these conversations are coming up about vulnerability and feelings, and it's very challenging conversations to have in that environment. So I think music,
it really is.
So I'm just, on relating to what we're saying, I just think that music, having this music and the way it moves people is a way for people to tap into that, isn't it? That new way of seeing and feeling. Yeah.
I hope so. Yeah. It's certainly a way for me to tap into, that conversation. Because I think some of us have felt quite alone in that experience for some time. I certainly did when I was a child. There was no one around me, thinking the things that I was thinking as a young child, which was like, oh, peak oil. Oh, you mean I just remember going, this trajectory is weird and it's not sustainable at a much younger age, but without the vocabulary, So I think there is a new soundtrack emerging from a number of different artists at this point.
Yeah. And there's something sort of interesting in a world in which so many things can be easily manufactured. And, there's a lot of music that AI is just going to make, and it's going to be just fine in terms of what it is. But I don't think it can make what we're making. I don't think it can replace vocal chemistry. I don't think it can replace the process of musicians actually interacting with one another. I don't think that it can replace staring into your guts or the darkness that you're experiencing and finding some light inside. I think it can do all kinds of things, but because it's never had a life, it's not capable of having a perspective on that life. And these are the things that bring us together. And what we really now need to reclaim is our humanness and our connection in all our flaws and all of our delusions to one another in a place that transcends all of those things.
I feel, where to go from there?
He's a bit eloquent, this one, isn't he?
Then you just have to
Yes.
sing.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do.
Let's share music. Well, I feel like the only song that I wanted to touch on where it came from, Dave, was The River and Weightless. We've gone through quite a lot of the songs, Lift the Veil and Thrum, but River and Weightless.
River. God, it's amazing how long it can take a song sometimes to come. Sometimes they happen in seconds, and other ones so when I went to India, I didn't know anything about Indian music, and I wasn't sure how I was going to entertain myself. So I took 2 instruments with me, this little Chinese accordion that had like 4 buttons on it and an Appalachian dulcimer. And I ended up writing a ton of stuff on those things. Okay. River has exactly 4 chords in it. And originally I wrote it on this little accordion, and there's this little riff that the violin ends up playing on. And so that was written on the accordion, and that just sat there for a while, until I could start to find out like what the words meant. But I had read, there's 2 literary references I'll make. One, Thomas Wolfe of Time and the River, and also Hermann Hesse's book Siddhartha. Both are somewhere in that song. And in some ways, I got a little bit ahead of myself in my life in that I wrote it at a time that I suppose foreshadowed to an experience I had later. I know that sounds really weird, but
No, I've heard it before by musicians. Yeah.
But I suppose I was trying to confront my own mortality and the transience of things. I think I was throwing the I Ching a lot too. So there's if you want another
Did you get that
reference.
from Paulie? I got that from Paulie.
No, I actually went to
studied-
India with it.
Okay.
Weirdly, I took a copy of the I Ching to India too. So I was kind of like simultaneously, 2 different forms of Eastern philosophy were experienced. But there's also number 29, the Abysmal, talks about how water always seeks the lowest point, and it masses behind obstacles, but it always finds its way around. But it does that really via humility.
Humility,
I love humility.
But I wanted to look with humility at the transience of my life, and and all these things we go through. What does that mean? And the funny thing is that I might have written the song I want played at my own funeral.
So funny you say that, because I was listening to that song and it made me think that is a song that I want to have at my funeral.
It's funny. I was
Fantastic.
actually, I was.
That's so
It's
cool.
so amazing. I was,
It's so
I was
dark,
actually
this
moved to.
conversation, but it's
I
not.
know,
It's
but
life and
it's
death,
not.
but it's
We
gotta
all-
have life, and you can't have
we
life
all
without death, and
have
death
to
without.
confront this. And but the thing is, I was moved to tears recently. I was talking to my father, who's now 89, and he was talking about a friend of his that had passed recently, and somebody he was actually one of my favorite friends of his, but I hadn't seen this guy in like a decade or longer.
Okay.
And he said, "You should know that he died listening to your music." And that stopped me in my tracks, because I wrote River to just try and make sense of things for myself. I didn't expect that people would put it on to take their last breath.
It's such a testament to when you put something out there, you just don't know how it's.
You don't know where it's going to land. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did play it once at a funeral. Okay, this is going to sound whack, but my mother died 5 years ago. And for anybody out there who's had to deal with the loss of a parent, it's very confrontive in terms of your own mortality. But what you don't get prepared for is that you're now in a funeral home and you have to like deal with like the body. Okay. And this person who gave you life is now stone cold. And the funeral director is like, well, what do you want to do with mom? And I'm like, first of all, she's my mom, not your mom. Okay. So you can refer to her as your mother. But she came to India when I was living there. And I thought, if I could, she died in Chicago, which is on Lake Michigan. And I was like, if it was up to me, I'd just take her out and put her on, cover with flowers and sandalwood and just torch her up right there on the shores of Lake Michigan. And he said, well, that's illegal in the state of Illinois, but you can go to the crematorium and push the button. So my wife and I went to the crematorium. They bring your mother in a cardboard box and in front of a huge green machine. And I sang a river and Saraswati Ma and Gate Gate Parasangate, Swaha, and covered her with flowers and Dervla put lipstick on her to make sure that she looked stylish on the way out.
I'm getting goosebumps.
And I pushed my mother off this gurney into this huge oven, and these big metal doors close. And I pushed the button. And the whole thing erupts into flames, and I just jumped back, and a circle got completed. This being who ushered me, I came through her door. And I pushed the button to send her out.
Yeah.
So we sang it again for her, my brother and sister, and, various grandchildren and stuff. We took her ashes out on a boat on a lake that is important in my family's history. And we let my mother's ashes go in the moonlight. And we sang River, where will I be when the ashes have scattered and gone? Forever the music and the mystery that splashes in water moves on. So that's River. Gotta know how to come back from that.
Well, there's a maturity. There's a maturity to the songs that we're writing, and I think that I feel really assured in that, in the sense that coming from a place where, pop songs being young and beautiful in LA, and this is a different era for me as a songwriter and for you as a songwriter, as we, it becomes the microcosm, the experience of the individual becomes the experience of the one, of the all. And I think that writing, trying to write songs, or being in that space and writing songs from that space.
This is the beautiful thing about being the age that we are.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's it feels really good. It just feels really good, and I'm proud of it. I think that that's what I'm trying to say, is that there's real worth in all of the hardships at this point, because you just know more, and have something therefore different to offer than the ooh baby stuff that I was writing, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I hope I keep writing till the very end.
Nothing wrong with ooh baby songs, though.
No, I mean, there's a place for all those things. Sometimes you want to just celebrate life mindlessly too, and that's great. Sometimes you just want to dance, and other times you just need to reflect on like what this all means. You know?
It takes me to when you were describing, Dave, on a Om Ganapataye, that it can be interpreted in everyone's own ways. And someone had written to you and said, party on, or I'm going to party on. I'm going to party on.
Oh, gonna party on.
Yeah.
Gonna party on. Gonna party on. Yeah.
Yeah, I explained that very messily, but you know what I'm saying? Like, people take their own interpretation from whatever we're putting out there, and it's their own experience that is where the beauty lies.
Yeah.
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 And so I think, following on from that beautiful, vulnerable sharing about your, you know, what you just shared with us with your mother, and I've, you know, we all felt that so much. So thank you for your vulnerability there. Like, yeah, we never know where we're going in this journey, and that was just so beautiful. And then following on from River, weightless, because I think that it follows on so beautifully in what we were just sharing. Like, where did weightless come to you? Yeah.
It came from a swing set. I was it says starts out, I'm flying on a crazy swing, can't find a point of balance in this teeter-totter world of mood I ride. Like teeter-totter is an American expression for like a seesaw. Yeah, like a seesaw. Yeah. And I was trying to deal with the fact in a sort of childlike way that there was never gonna be a point of stillness. That somehow everything's always whirling around, and that act of movement creates its own gravity. So I suppose there was a wish to like be freed of that gravity, and like, well, how do we do that? You know? Because our lives are this course of, you know, just whirling rings, you know, and we go round and around and around the same things again, and it has a specific like weight and gravity to it, and yet all of us want to somehow be released from that, and it gets into a deeper sort of sense of love as being like everything that I hold on to is what creates weight. Like releasing my expectations or my hold on things is what creates an experience of true love. But I needed also another voice in the song. So Sheila adds something really profound in terms of perspective on it, because there's a little bit of a sense of like, Sheila's voice provides a little objectivity on the experience, you know, a way of looking at it from an other's experience as well. So in some way, part of the letting go too was to let go of myself as the principal narrator, and to hear words that I had crafted as being spoken by another's experience or another character. And that's an interesting kind of, you know, journey as a writer. I mean, Sheila, maybe you can speak to how it feels to hear me sing your words.
Well, yeah, you let go and you let something else emerge. You know, I think God, just going with that song again, but God was incredibly personal, and took me a while to put it out there, because every word for me had to be very precise before I took the leap of, because at that point that was a huge jump for me. I mean, I just went back home for Christmas, and you know, we're sitting around the table, and my whole family, with my two brothers and their wives and kids, and my mom and my dad, and everybody's, you know, and they're sort of provincial Thatcher voting conservatives, right? Is how I grew up, and lots of boys as well in my family. I'm pretty much the only girl. Anyway, and my brother, so there's a pause, and my brother says, Sheila, so do you believe in God? And I said, yeah. And the whole table just erupted in laughter. Just thought it was really hilariously funny. And I'm just so deeply secure in my knowing that I'm just like, just unfazed completely. Just knowing full well that would be the response or reaction, I should say.
Or reaction.
And just knowing the specific, because of the song really, and because I've played it so many times and worked out every single word to make sure that, oh yeah, I can stand behind every single word in the song as a post-atheist understanding of this word God, which I tried to remove all religiosity from and all dogma from, that so that word would work for me. So then bringing it to Dave to sing is you have to completely just surrender entirely. It's no longer mine, and that I'd held on so strongly to, because I, during the trying of working it out of, well, what do you believe, and what does work here, and what can I surrender to, and then when you let go, it then just changes form, becomes something completely different, and as I said, it becomes a conversation and takes on an entirely new meaning. And has its own life,
Because actually, I'm an agnostic, and which is, it puts another spin on it too. Because Sheila is reclaiming her, her belief in God, and for me, I'm able to sing the song as a way of asking questions. To say that you're an agnostic is different than atheism. Atheism says there is no God. Agnosticism says means against. Gnosis, knowledge. But it literally means is I don't know. And so for me to sing those words, I'm able to sing it completely as I don't know, because it's a series of questions about like what's the nature of this thing that we're talking about. So somehow, Sheila's written a song that can be sung both from the perspective of belief, and also from not exactly non-belief, but skepticism.
It's very difficult to argue with, even if you're an atheist. It's difficult to argue with what is everything that's in there, essentially, in many respects. I mean, we are living in what seems to be an infinite universe floating on a ball of mud in space. We do have these tiny anthropomorphic perspectives, and I think that I feel like I can stand by every word in that. And I've also taken that to my brothers and sat them down and said, well, what exactly do you not agree with in this? Apart from the G word itself, essentially everything else is backed up by science. It's all science backed up, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Glad we figured
No,
that
but
one out.
it's actually, it's an amazing thing to write something and realize that it can be interpreted in ways that even you might not have strictly intended, and that those things are valid
absolutely.
as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of different perspectives in the world, and they all together make up the world, but we're all limited by those perspectives. I mean, that's, for example, what At My Window is about. Is it, it says, anywhere in the world I go, I'm in the best seat. Like there's no view is complete, but it's the only view I know. And I have to write from the perspective of where I am and what my experience is. But the way somebody views that experience may bring a different dimension to that experience. So in some ways, we're all the one seeing the one, we're, I suppose, to use that G word, we're God's way of knowing about God. And that's the process of inquiry that we're committed to. That's what we're doing when we write songs.
Well, I'm going to finish up now with the two of you with a last question that I think is, and then I think we want to just direct the listeners to where they can connect with you and get to see you live, hopefully, in Australia at some point. And we'll finish up with that. But let's start with where can they connect with you, and then we'll go to the last question.
The place I would point people, especially if you want to hear Thrum before it comes out in March of 2024, is it is up on my Bandcamp site. And Bandcamp's really cool because they actually pay the musicians, and in ways that the streaming services don't. I mean, I appreciate that you can, hear us on Spotify or Apple Music anywhere in the world, and that's easy. Bandcamp's a little bit more focused, but quietly, Thrum is up on Bandcamp, and not released per se, but you can hear it there. And I've got a website, davestringer.com, and that points you to various things that are going on. Sheila?
Yep, pretty much same thing up on Bandcamp. We also have, songs on Spotify, YouTube, loads of stuff. And my website is SheilaNichols.com. So we have all those, and, Facebook and Insta and all of those fun.
We're findable.
Yeah, we are.
I will share all the links. And so I like to finish off the show with, what is love to you?
It's the hardest question to answer. And I would say that probably we write songs about it again and again because we can't quite answer that question for ourselves. Like each time, I feel like I'm answering it imperfectly. Like, I'd say that, in Weightless, I say, in letting go, I celebrate true love and know a boundless state alive in me where all this weight is light. But that's not all of it, because sometimes it's not letting go, it's digging in. It's like going through the hard things and without any assured outcome. There's a commitment aspect of it as well. There's a grace aspect to love in terms of what is unbidden, but you can't love without some kind of commitment either.
Love is the solution, I think. And I think what I mean by that is, peace and love, bro. It's not a cliche. It's a revolutionary understanding that the constant warfare that we're so conditioned to live within, whether that's vulture capitalism, which is exploitative in its foundation, the only thing that's, I think, that we're going to if we're going to evolve and we're actually going to live on this planet in peace, because I'm not really into Elon Musk, let's go to Mars and colonize another one. What we really need to do is understand that love dissolves hate and fear. Love dissolves our fight or flight reaction, our animal fight or flight reaction. Love, when we take the time to recognize another person as just, as a part of, as another, when we have compassion, and we can, reach beyond our fears of perception of other, our consistent humans, consistent issues with tribalism, just the ways that we create judgment. It's love that comes in and, makes us go, maybe I'll just wave nicely to my neighbor this morning and not flip her off, or whatever it is. There's a different way. There's a different choice there. It takes a mature person to not come from a reactionary space. This difference between reaction and response. I think it's a very important, pivotal place for individuals to try to take responsibility for all the traumas that we have. We're all traumatized in various different ways, not to downplay anybody's pain or lessen, but everybody is traumatized simply by being socialized in a society that rewards warfare and competition. And love is the solution. It's the way that we're going to be able to live indefinitely on this planet if we choose to love all beings as our brethren and sistren, which is the ultimate universal truth, I think. Without it, I don't think we're going to make it. I think it's that deep.
It's funny. I come back to those words that you wrote in God, which somehow I just realized now, like how they prefigured the pandemic too. Love without resistance, love without a cure, love everlasting, love forevermore. And it speaks to the end of boundaries. The end of me and mine, and to something that doesn't need to be fixed, to something that has always been here and will always be here.
Whether or not we are or not.
Yeah, independent of our
behind
own,
everything again.
Yeah, independent of our existence, independent of our awareness. I suppose you can say it is consciousness itself in that sense, to put a fine point on a topic that's been flying around here,
Yeah.
It's possibly the ground. Yeah, it's the whole circle. It's the ground of all being and awareness. It all starts there and it ends there too.
Mm-hmm. Let's end there on love.
Yeah.
What a beautiful, beautiful chat we have shared today. And
thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, it's a delight to talk
really,
about these
so
things.
Nice to
it really
see you
is.
again, and thanks for holding the space for these conversations.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
We look forward to being back in Australia as soon as we can manage it. So,
well, we'd love to have both of you back in Australia. Dave, I think there's a little chance we'll get you very soon, but love to have you both here, and sharing these songs live would be incredible. So thank you so much for chatting with me on the One Space Love Show.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Steph.
My space, your space. Your space, my space. Our space.
You've been listening to the One Space Love Show. I am Steph Pappas. Head over to onespace.love to learn more about One Space Love. I hope that these episodes have inspired you to create more space in your life to do more of what you love for the love of it.
Our space. One space love.